you know, it's a lot that was said. I hope I can remember everything I wanted to respond to. But I mean, I think that a lot of good points are being made. But I think that we got to understand one thing about black violence is that it oftentimes goes hand in hand with the systemic racism. You know, I mean, I think like you can't forget that. Like you got to remember that the violence, the interpersonal violence between black people goes almost hand in hand with the systemic. Now, there's a level of it that's just a matter of human interaction. Like humans are going to have conflicts with one another and be like on some Cain and Abel stuff. But I'm talking about when it gets to the fact where we have disproportionate amounts of black on black violence. A lot of that disproportionate amounts is coming from the responses that we're having to give to the systemic racism. So, you know, I mean, I need people to understand that, back when we talk about the heyday and all of this stuff and blacks, you know, black families were together and all of that. You got to understand that one thing that black people had, and that was jobs. They had jobs. They had jobs in mills. They had jobs in factories. They had jobs working in homes as domestics. They had jobs, and they were able to stay together. And inflation wasn't terrible, so it didn't cost an arm and a leg. I mean, people could buy a whole house for $5,000. You buy your whole home for $5,000, and so inflation wasn't terrible. I mean, you get a thing of milk for a nickel. It costs $1 to $2 to fill up your car with gas. I mean, like things were cheaper, and so, you know, if you look at the numbers, the data shows that, you know, what happened is what people ignore about the civil rights movement is that Dr. King leveraged black labor to push an agenda for civil rights. That cannot be ignored. He was taking people out of the mills and out of the factories to go and march in the daytime during work hours. It was messing up the business owners' pockets. There was a labor component to this. And so the business owners put pressure and said, y'all got to integrate these buses because our people are not coming to work. They always marching. So there was an economic component to it that is ignored. Now, what we got to think about what happened in the 70s and the 80s was a lot of those jobs started to go to rural areas. They started leaving Compton. They left Southside Jamaica, Queens. They left Baltimore. They started leaving those jobs, started leaving and going out to either the rural area or they were going overseas. And the very moment them jobs left, came in drugs, and the drugs was being brought in from Reagan administration, and Reagan was putting them drugs in a community that was economically depraved, that had tremendous competition. Everybody wanted to feed their family, and came gangs. And the gangs are an offshoot of the destruction of the black military organizations. Out of the destruction of the Panthers rose the gangs. And so all of that comes to us in the 80s, the 70s, and the 80s. So the point I'm trying to make is that interpersonal violence is connected. So then you had the mass incarceration legislation that, I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Don't nobody beat me up, but it's facts. The mass incarceration legislation that was written by Joe Biden that got 1 in 4 black men in the prison system or on parole or on probation. To this day, a quarter of us are wrapped up in the criminal injustice system because of Biden, who's now running for president. And I know Trump is bad, but I'm just pointing out what Biden did. So nobody slapped me upside the head. I'm just saying that's what he did. When that legislation came, they swept up all the fathers. You got caught with a bag of marijuana, you going to prison. All these guys going to prison. They weren't there to raise their kids. And the social worker stepped in, the guidance counselor stepped in and said, we're going to raise these kids, and the government's going to raise these kids, not two parents. We're going to raise them. The mama had to go out to work. The kids were having to raise themselves. Mama out working, or some of the moms were in bad shape. All these things are happening, and so we end up with a group of kids who, like you said, they don't feel like they've been loved. They don't know what love is. They're afraid of love, and so again, the interpersonal problems go hand in hand with the systemic problems in the Black community. I don't care. You can. Let me ask y'all this: what is the ritziest neighborhood in Baltimore? What would you say is the most high class Baltimore neighborhood?
Oh, Baltimore.
What would you say?
Mount Washington.
Mount Washington. All right. So take Mount Washington. I don't care what neighborhood it is, take Mount Washington. If I were to have the military might to put this community under siege, put it under siege, to restrict its flow of resources, to restrict its flow of food, to restrict its source of water, to restrict its source of economics. If I had the power to do that, that community would eventually turn on itself. There is no community that will not do this. People will eventually start to eat one another. Like literally, they would cannibalize one another. So we call the Black neighborhoods, they call the poor Black neighborhoods the ghetto. That term ghetto literally comes from people who are under siege. Like that's really what that term means. When they took the Jewish people in Germany and put them in concentration, they put them together to live amongst each other. They restricted their resources, pretty much put them under siege. They called it a ghetto. That's what that's what a ghetto is. A ghetto is a people who are living under siege. And ghettos always create interpersonal conflicts. Always. They always will, because there's a lack of resources. I could take all you beautiful sisters, and maybe some brothers here today, but so far I know of only the sisters. I could take all you beautiful sisters and put y'all in a room by yourself and lock you in there. You're locked in there. Boom, locked. And you're locked in there. I have you in there for 3-4 days, locked in there. I open the hatch and throw in a bottle of water. I know y'all some God-fearing women, but some of y'all gonna be fighting over that water. Y'all gonna be punching each other in the face. Y'all gonna be jamming and elbowing each other. It's gonna be a nasty scene. It doesn't mean that y'all are bad people. It just means that I'm a bad person. I have taken you all out of your natural habitat, locked you up, restricted your resources, made you starve, and now I'm sitting back watching you fight over my bottle of water, and I even find it entertaining. World star, right? World star. So to me, interpersonal violence, oftentimes when the disproportionate aspects of it go hand in hand with the state systemic racism issues.